I mean, the obvious question to ask you, Shanta, I guess, that you've been so centrally involved in these debates and played such a formative role in them over a lot of years. And in some ways, you've come into your own in the sense that these issues are right back at the centre of the agenda on the bank, and the top of the bank agenda in some ways now. But I think it would be really instructive for us to get a sense of one, how you feel the debate has moved on since 2004, and in a sense, what difference has it made? What difference has it made to practice? What difference has it made for what donors bring to the table?
Okay, well, thanks, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be on this distinguished panel. I think the one thing where the debate has changed, I wouldn't say it's shifted, but it's just evolved, is really the topic of this session, which is, as I said earlier, in the WDR 2004, we said there were two things that were important for service delivery. One is for citizens to hold politicians accountable, and the other is for politicians and policymakers to be able to hold service providers accountable. And we implicitly said those were equally important. I think my thinking over the past decade has convinced me that the first is much more important than the second. And no matter how much you try to fix the organizational or management side with pay for performance or other types of tricks, if the underlying politics is dysfunctional, if there are people who are earning rents from the current system, they will resist and find ways to overcome the reforms that you're trying to make. Now, that's an observation based on research and experience. Now, the question is, well, and if I could maybe illustrate it with this one anecdote, which I mentioned earlier as well, where we were trying to introduce timestamp machines for nurses in India as a way of reducing absenteeism, health worker absenteeism, where they had to actually show that they showed up for work in order to get paid. And we set up, and then of course we wanted to do a randomized control trial, so we set up in randomly chosen clinics these timestamp machines, and the control group didn't have timestamp machines, and we're all ready to go to evaluate this experiment so that it could actually be used. And the day before the scheme was supposed to start, all the timestamp machines were vandalized. And that just showed to me that if you try to fix the management, the politics can come around to hurt you. So what have we been trying to do? And Rukmini's work and Pratham has been almost an inspiration for us. I think what we have to do, and this gets to what John was saying about the political will as well, what we try to do is create the information base so that poor people can bring pressure to bear on the political system. It's not that, we can't bring that pressure to bear from the outside. This is a deeply political move. But I think the kind of information that ASER produces is one of the most powerful ways. And now ASER has got to the point where the prime minister or the planning minister actually launches the report. I mean, this is a report that in many ways is an indictment of the public education system in India. But it's still embraced by the prime minister because this information is useful as a way of triggering progress in the system, and it has, as Rukmini was alluding to earlier. Now, how has this worked at the bank? Well, all of these, when you realize that the problem is politics, it's very difficult for a development institution that has been used to doing development projects and giving analytical advice to try to operate if we continue to operate in the same way, we wouldn't get the results that we desire. And so we've actually changed. I mean, in some cases, we actually not only do we also collect this information. I mean, for instance, we're collecting data on service delivery indicators in Africa, across Africa, and publishing that. as a way of getting some benchmark competition among the countries. But I think more importantly and more interestingly, and this really is thanks to Pratham, when we design an education project, for instance, when we design an education project, the bank usually sends in a whole team that does all the complicated, we have a whole team doing project preparation, which does all the complicated financial flow, the flow of funds, and getting all the checks and balances right and everything else. And we still find, the teachers are still absent 25–30% of the time, so this project isn't moving. Because we know that there are political reasons. The teachers, maybe powerful teachers' unions. In Uttar Pradesh, 20% of the state legislature are teachers, and another 20% are former teachers. So it's very hard to get education reform in those kinds of situations. So now what we're having is some of our teams are using part of the project preparation funds to finance surveys like Pratham, like Asar. Realizing that actually giving money to an NGO, we do this in Africa now too, giving money to an NGO to go collect the data and publicize it. And that actually has helped move our project. It makes our project better, just like all our project preparation funds should be doing. So it has changed that perspective. It's slow, and as we were discussing earlier, it's difficult because there's a lot of inertia in the system. I mean, you got some guy who's been preparing a project for 2 years, and then some crackpot chief economist comes along and says, no, this is not how you should do it because of all of these constraints. They don't want to hear that. And so the progress has not been as rapid as I would have liked. But I think that's the direction we're going, and it really is thanks to champions like John and Rukmini that we can make this kind of progress.
Thanks. Can I just ask you one question? That I guess as you've said, at the heart of these problems are politics. And, in addressing these issues, you're hopping about in some politically very sensitive territory. That basically you're looking for outcomes which the elites, which, like it or not, in a sense you have to work through, may regard as counter to their interest. More equitable taxation systems, more equitable spending systems, health systems that do less to serve the rich, more to serve the poor. I mean, how do you manage that political tension?
Well, this is interesting, and this goes back to the discussion we were having earlier this afternoon about governance or the sectors, because we don't go at it from the point of view of governance. We're saying we want to get children educated. That's the only goal. And it's very difficult for the elites to say they're against that. So then the only question is, how do you do that? And there we might have to push for reforms that actually will take away the rents of some of the elites. But as long as you keep the goal of educating poor children, and in particular, and that's the other point here, that it's the poor who are systematically excluded from the system. The rich will educate their kids no matter what, right? So these are the people, and these are the people for whom, by the way, public education is designed to serve. And these are the people who are missing out on that public education. So these are the people that we want to educate. These are the people that whose lives can be improved with quality education. And then we will try every which way to go at it. So it's less of a, John referred to Jim Wolfenson's attempt to go after corruption. I almost never mention the word corruption in all of this, even though it is corruption. In fact, I once called it quiet corruption, when teachers are absent 40% of the time. That is the equivalent of corruption, but it doesn't get into the scandals. It doesn't get into the press the way a big, the 2G telephone deal in India does. Yet, in fact, we did a back-of-the-envelope calculation. The absentee teachers, that sum of money lost or transferred for absentee teachers is bigger than the 2G scandal. But several ministers had to resign on the 2G scandal. But as far as I know, no minister has had to resign on teacher absenteeism in India.
Thanks.